Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. They did. They absolutely got it right. And you know what? Everything we're going through right now is, in effect, living proof that what the Anti-Federalists were talking about regarding taking out God, designing people that did not understand or wanted to take and utilize the Constitution and all the mechanism within the Constitution for their own personal gain. And when you take and you keep a people ignorant and immoral and lacking virtue, you get to where we are today. And yes, this is Tom Novolis, your host. How are you? Hey, one of the things I wanted to take and show you is that, these programs, they just go so fast. And I forgot to show you something that I wanted to show you last week. This goes all the way back. I'm going to hold it up here so you can see it. This is from 1997, a T-shirt that we had made. There were a number of us that were working on different things on Freedom 97, a day of action. Just stuff that we were doing because we were seeing a lot of stuff back in 1997, 1996, where the rise of what we're seeing as the tyranny before us with a Biden and Democrat socialist / communist potential regime, if God does not grant us Donald Trump, is that rise in tyranny, which we were seeing back then in 97. So that was the front of the shirt. The front of the shirt said that Freedom 97. I'm going to hold it up again for those that are on YouTube or went to SamuelAdamsReturns.net. You can see that. And it has a nice American flag on the left shoulder. Now look at the backside. This was way cool. Tyranny Response Team. How about that? Tyranny Response Team. So if we still need our tyranny response teams out there to continue to fight for our liberty as we look at what this program is going to discuss today. Some of the things that were key points of interest where I kind of wanted to focus with you is in Federalist 23 with Alexander Hamilton. And then the response to that being Anti-Federalist number 17, as it was noted in one of the author's charts and at the website that I put in as a link for today's program. There in the promotion. So again, go to SamuelAdamsReturns.net. It's up over my shoulder to see the description, promotion, newsletter for today's program, and where all the reference links are for the program as well. But anyway, Anti-Federalist number 17 was a response to by Mr. Yates to none other than Alexander Hamilton, which many of you know I have no affinity towards Hamilton. In many ways, Hamilton, unbeknownst to himself, was a founding globalist. He wanted a nation so strong, a federal government so strong, that all of the states would be subservient to that. And we're going to kind of touch on that. But first, you're probably wondering, and I need to explain, that in the promo, I opened it up and I titled today's programs that this, once again, is political theology, chickens running around looking for happiness. And what that in part was reference to, and I don't want to belabor it in this first segment, and all of those that are listening there at Soaring Eagle, I definitely suggest you go back to SamuelAdamsReturns.net and listen to the whole podcast that'll be up there later on Saturday, and listen to that second segment as we start talking about what's going on with Federalist 23, Anti-Federalist 17, and some of the other aspects of the cancel culture revolution. And that may float over into the third segment. But what I want to address, immediate and first, is because we're seeing now, someone came up to me. Let me take that step back a second. Someone came up to me last Saturday while we were at a craft show, was having our display and selling our delicious Pepperlicious jams. So you got to help support what we're doing for you in Ohio and get some of the delicious Pepperlicious jams. But this person and I were talking, and I was talking over by their area, and he's a Christian fella, and they're really in tune with a lot of what's going on, especially his wife. And he looks at me and he goes, "Did you ever expect this type of stuff to happen in our lifetime?" And I looked at him and I went, "Yeah." And he shook his head. But then somebody came up and we didn't get a chance to elaborate on that. So hopefully I'll see him Saturday, today, because even though I do this program, you all know that I pre-record the program. So I will be seeing him Saturday, today. And I will explain to him further that, yes, I did expect all of this to happen in my lifetime. My prayer and hope would be that we would have that reprieve, that mercy of God upon us with Donald Trump, and taking and moving back to a sense of what republicanism is, how to function at the national level, instead of the Hamiltonian implementation of the Constitution that the socialists love, because I've explained to you how many times about the Kozak plan. But the idea that the chicken's running around, I looked to it and I equated it to, well, we talked about the Kozak plan. We've talked about socialism in America. We talked about the deep state. We talked about the shadow government, especially over these last 5 years, and that we're not hearing from the pulpits what they're on the website. Go there and click on that about the chaplains and clergy and the preaching of the day. So I'm going to bring that out also in today's program, is the sermon from Timothy Dwight, just the very beginning of it, and probably in the third segment, I am going to read a portion of that because it is absolutely relevant. This was in 1797 that he preached this sermon, and it is absolutely relevant. It goes to the whole heart of everything we're dealing with: mental health, dealing with the military-industrial complex, dealing with all of those things that affect our liberty. And I know I should hold up the T-shirt. I got my hands up, folks that are just listening to the podcast and hearing us on Liberty Works Radio Network, is that, oh yeah, that tyranny, and we need to have a response, and we have to have a righteous response for that. But the chicken's running around, and I eliminated the rest of that statement for the moment and this program, looking for happiness, because the chicken's running around, they're shouting and they're saying the sky is falling, all these other things. And a lot of that goes back to what we talk about on the political theology of the chickens roosting on the rooftop. You see, what we have, and I mentioned it last week, was on this Christian socialism. And I said that there were other people that would take the time, and I was hoping that you would go listen to them at least, or find their podcasts and all that, to understand that Americans already, I think the Time magazine that was out there when Obama got elected, that we're all socialists now, is so spot on, because that comes so true in the whole social media thing. And so I look at the Rooftop Christians, those that have been looking for the rapture, Jesus' return, and that all this evil had to come forward so that Jesus could come back. And I think that's messed up theology. I'm sorry if I'm insulting anybody, but man, the way I've studied Scripture for many, many years, and because the dates have been missed multiple times about people thinking when a rapture would come to play, you're still sitting on the rooftop. The flood is up around you. Jesus sent the seals. He sent the helicopters. He sent all of other means, which means he sent the Constitution. He sent what it means to be in a republic. He sent the whole fact that we as a church should be living the fullness of liberty to the fullest extent. But, you know, up looking around up there sitting on the rooftop. And I use that whole allegory of chickens running around. But the real key point on this is I want to get through these last several minutes of this first segment, how time flies, and Kat's a good timekeeper on this, a great producer for this program, is that social media isn't. It never has been social, nor is it ever been media. It's a playground for people that went from, and I can say from being part of DARPA, go look up DARPA, D-A-R-P-A, DARPA, and what they play in. And having participated in that, I can tell you that Facebook and a lot of the others are, never mind, you'll get the idea of it. But the bottom line is they're not social. In fact, they're destroying society from not making that phone call and say, hey, Tom, can we get together at your house? How about let's just go out for coffee? Let's meet. Hey, family, let's get together. Instead, everybody's click, 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 click. And that's not social. Social is us getting face to face and having those interactions. And media, it ain't, because most everybody puts up the same old stuff and regurgitates in an echo chamber. And you know what? We're already seeing, based on the FCC regulations, they're not classified as media, so they're not held accountable as media. Anyway, to that point is that now we have all these people bailing off the Facebooks, Twitters, Quitters, Yitters, and Ditters, and going to, where am I going? I'm going to MeWe, I'm going to the Parlor, I'm going to this, I'm going to that. They're running around like chickens with, yes, missing a significant part that should be their brains, or they're not missing that because what they did is they stuck their heads where the sun doesn't shine, and so that causes them to run around in circles as well. So with that, you know, over the course of 4 years, even before Donald Trump got elected, I started a social media company. And yes, you had to pay $5 to be a part of it. And I integrated that company in with someone else, and we started a whole replacement for Google apps, not the search engine side, but the apps. It would have taken care of Facebook. It would have taken care of Twitter. It would have taken care of all of your other apps. But nobody out there wanted to participate, or the few that did, that came along, there were a few, I can name them. In fact, I'm interacting with several. But the fact of the matter is, hey, conservatives, patriots, you're still socialist. You want it all for free. There ain't nothing free. So chasing after Parler and Bongino and all of these other guys that say that they own the company, and the MeWe's, Peewees, and fire hydrant sprayers, all that type of stuff, it's not free. Who are their boards? Who are the people behind those companies? Is their patriotism pure, like Sam Adams? I don't know. I researched them as competition for what we were doing as companies. Yes, I'm bemoaning, but I'm telling you facts of life. People, there's no free lunch. You got to pay for something somehow, and so do they, because technically it costs a lot of money to make that work. Sam Adams understood all of that. He understood society. He understood Christianity, and he understood that patriotism was more worth than a paycheck. Paychecks don't matter if you don't have liberty. Come on back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. They absolutely got it right. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, and I'm so delighted that you're here with me on Liberty Works Radio Network and the other network opportunities that are out there. But Liberty Works Radio Network is going to continue to be there for you, especially when you help them. They're going to be one of the few networks out there for voices that you're not going to find anywhere else, because all of the other media stuff isn't going to happen. They're going to take, and you're going to see a lot of the big names jumping ships from the Foxes, Doxes, and whatever else platform that they're on. They're going to find ways to consolidate, and they're going to try and recreate something. And I do hope and pray that through the Trump family, something else comes about, and we see some good replacements for the likes of Fox and all the other stuff, and other platforms as well. But when it comes down to it, is that they get mega funding somehow. Liberty Works Radio Network is you, and it is funded by you. So it's critical to go on there, look at all those other hosts and hostesses, hit that donate button, and please keep this network on the air, because it is there for your liberty and will help sustain your liberty, because you know what? The folks on this network are real patriots and real fighters. So with that, I wanted to finish addressing a little bit on the social media isn't social, and it is not media. As I closed out the last segment, I was a little bit bemoaning the fact that so many patriots out there don't understand that it takes money to build infrastructure, especially when you have true, heartfelt patriots, lovers of liberty, the true lovers of liberty, from loving God first and understanding that hierarchy of that relationship, willing to stretch out and try and develop something. I mean, that's what I do here with Sam Adams. As I've told you before, and this is not bemoaning anything, this is just flat out fact, is that Kath and I do this in what we're doing for you and for our kids, our grandkids, and hopefully posterity, if they get the chance to look at the archives and keep them going and available. This is a work of passion. So I guess, like Sam Adams, he didn't make a whole lot of money. Sam Adams died virtually a pauper. But he was called the founder of the American Revolution. I'm not expecting to ever be called anything like that. I've been called all sorts of other names, which we won't get into. But what we want to do is make sure that those whose first course is the love of God and the love of liberty, they get supported. And when you look at technology, what it costs to build an infrastructure and build in all of the various components. Again, you got to remember, I was an executive in the telecom. I started out at putting PCs together, and then ended up as an executive in the telecom industry. So I have an understanding of what it costs to build a communications infrastructure. And in doing that, it takes funding, it takes that ability, it takes the users, it takes people that are willing to participate, build their content, do all of those things, and put a couple bucks to it. So, when you look at a latte a month as something to take and have a really secure type of network, that was what we were building. But you know what? ain't there. So, I like Dan Bongino and all of the other people that are out there doing stuff, but you know what? He's an investor in Parler. And investors are doing that for what? An investment. So when you're looking at everything that's going on out there, I would just ask you to kind of pay attention and check it out. And don't be a chicken just running here, tither, there, tither, scratching because of, as I say in there in the little allegory, is you're scratching in the yard, but you're not scratching to feed yourself and find your own food. What you're doing is you're looking for that which the guy that's going to collect your eggs and eventually put you in the freezer is willing to throw out there for you to feed on. So I would caution you and ask you to pay attention to that. Okay, let's get over to Federalist 23 with our guy here, Alexander Hamilton. And a couple of points that I wanted to bring out on Hamilton. What he was talking about is the idea of the three branches of government, the quantity of power necessary to accomplish what is within those three branches, and the persons upon whom that power is to operate. So as we go through it, is that the principal purpose to be answered by the Union are these: the common defense of the members, the preservation of the public peace, as well against internal convulsions as external attacks, the regulation of commerce with other nations and between the states, the superintendence of our intercourse, our communications, both political and commercial, with foreign countries. The authorities essential to the common defense are these: to raise armies, to build equipped fleets, to prescribe rules of government, and so on in support of this. These powers ought to be, here, this is the key one, because I see this, I read it, and want you to get it in your heads. These powers ought to exist without limitation. And there's more. And there's more. And he goes on to talk about, because it's impossible to foresee or define the extent and variety of national exiges or the correspondent extent and variety of the means which may be necessary to what? Satisfy them. So reason says that no constitutional shackles can wisely be imposed on the power to which the care of it is committed. So he's talking very strongly about this whole idea that the federal government should have unlimited powers when it comes to the military and how it's to be used, and to the extent that how it's even used internal in the country. Wow. See, Hamilton's kind of got these big government ideas, and yet the Anti-Federalists refute that. That is not what the American Revolution was fought for. Yeah, we need to have associations. Yes, we do need to be able to have good commerce interactions without, tariffing one another as they go across state lines. Yes, we need to be able to quell internal insurrection as well as external invasion, which, hey, the Democrats don't want to do that. Just think about it. Listen to Joe Biden already. He's going to tear down the border wall. He's going to let the invasion continue in from out of all these other countries. And he wouldn't put down insurrection when it comes to Black Lives Matter. But I guess if you and I went out into the streets, that guess what? They're going to do what they doing in Italy now is excessive fines and time in prison if you don't wear your mask and you don't social distance and you congregate in public. Look at California and New York. They're threatening people with jail time to celebrate Thanksgiving. Okay. I mean but you want to know something? Hey, like many, they read the Federalist Papers and never read the Anti-Federalist Papers, nor have we ever implemented, as I talk about often, that agreement between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist that the implementation of the Constitution would include those provisions that the Anti-Federalists argued. We haven't seen that happen in 230 years. Okay, so let's go on because I only got, what, 3 minutes? 5 minutes, Kat's saying here. So here's something that is pre-Marxian, Hamiltonian, pre-Marxian, Hamiltonian, Marxian. People that are listening to the podcast and listening to the radio program and and listening at Soaring Eagle aren't seeing my fingers come together where I'm putting my fingers together on Hamiltonian and Marxian philosophy to an extent. Here it is that when you think about truth, what's an unprejudiced mind and what carries the evidence, and here's where it all goes. It rests upon the axioms. Now, these are axioms out there. And remember that Sam Adams said that anything running towards utopianism was unconstitutional, is the idea that it's simple. This is a universal axiom. The means ought to be proportioned to the end. The persons from whose agency the attainment of the end is expected ought to possess the means by which it is to be attained. I think Marx took that finally and he said that what? And others have said that and this is ancient in so many different ways, is that the what? The ends justify the means. That's fundamentally what he's saying. So much more here. So much more here is that, considering the circumstances and what was going on within the context of the necessities of taking and having that almost absolute power of the federal government to exercise the military, both external and internal, is something that Hamilton was strongly proposing here in Federalist number 23. And what that distribution of it was. He talks about here who is likely to make suitable provisions for the public defense as that body to which the guardianship of the public safety is confined. But when you have people that are out there looking at what do you look at for that public safety and who is it? Well, then you have, look what's going on right now in the States. Look what's going on with Black Lives Matter. Look what's going on in Portland. Look what happened in Seattle. Look what happened in Philadelphia. Look what happened in Washington, D.C. itself. Who's responsible for the safety of the public? Who's responsible? Is there any uniformity that's there in plans and measures and which can be common to that safety? Can it be secured effectively? Yes, there's a lot here. There's so much in this that we're going to have to carry it over into segment number 3 as we talk about it. But I want to throw a little bit out there when we start talking about safety and security and the design of different things. Take a look at what happened with China. And you all know the story of Genghis Khan. Come on. I mean, you watched what's that, Night at the Museum, and Genghis Khan out there chasing around the guy and wanting to tear everybody apart and all of that. Genghis Khan, you got it, right? How about this, that the present emperor of the Communist Party and the Communist Party of China is taking and obliterating Genghis Khan, canceling him from all of history. Check out that article that's in the references for today's program at samueladamsreturns.net. Yep, Sam Adams understood that the only way to maintain that liberty was to have that understanding that God is in control first and foremost. And I don't know if you have a clear picture of that, but I would hope that you would take the time to come back into the third segment as we not only finish up a little bit here on Federalist 23. I'm just going to introduce something very briefly from Anti-Federalist 17 in response, and I'm going to key in on something very simple And then we're going to get into Dr. Dwight's opening paragraph of the sermon that I think I proposed to you once before, but I want you to hear the words very clearly, and they are in the newsletter at samueladamsreturns.net. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-Federalists, they did. They got it right. This is the third segment. And yes, this is Tom Navolis, your host. And we're going to jump right back into this. And, welcome back, all you soaring eagles, screaming eagles. You better be screaming, and you better be soaring, and you better be soaring for liberty. Thanks, Dr. Mike, for taking and keeping everybody abreast of the truths, the realities, and that liberty reigns only because Christ reigns. And let's move on. So Hamilton in 23 here, in Federalist 23, I want to finish off this paragraph. Then we're going to go into Anti-Federalist 17 a little bit and definitely talk about Dr. Dwight in what he had to say. Hamilton kind of continues in here. He goes, every view we may take on the subject, that being of the military standing, and how it's controlled and the measures and security, as candid inquirers after truth, notice how truth always comes into a conversation, but what's its reference point, will serve to convince us that it is both unwise and dangerous to deny the federal government an unconfined authority as to all those objects which are entrusted to its management. It will indeed deserve the most vigilant and careful attention of the people to see that it be modeled in such a manner as to admit of its being safely vested with the requisite powers. If any plan which has been or may be offered our consideration should not upon any dispassionate inspection be found to answer this description, it ought to be rejected. A government, the constitution of which renders it unfit to be trusted with all the powers which a free people ought to delegate to any government, would be an unsafe and improper depository of the national interest. And then he goes on talking about this. And what he's really, this is the only good part of 23, in my opinion. What that is that we, the people, were to be responsible to ensure that those that governed and implemented government would do it in a manner that would be none other than, as John Adams, Sam Adams, Madison, and others said, from a moral and virtuous perspective. People failed. We lost that, especially when we went into the social gospel movement in the mid-1800s. People lost the idea of their responsibility to be the guardians of their own liberty. The guardians of their own liberty. There's other stuff in the ending paragraphs of 23 that I would say have a positive note, but just think about it. So you have the likes of the Obamas, all of these other Democrats who have read the Federalist Papers, have no God mindset. And so they, as I've described before under the context of the Kozak plan, have taken and are utilizing our own means and mechanisms within the context of a constitutional system to take that constitutional system into socialism. Interesting, isn't it? I think it's very interesting. But, hey, that's, what do you want me to say? It's interesting. And it's sad. But there's more to it than that. So let's see here. When we're looking at Anti-Federalist number 17, they attribute it to Yates. And it is the discussion of clause 1 through 17 of Article 1, Section 8 of the, at that time, proposed Constitution. There's a statement in here, and this is where Yates is talking about this new government possesses absolute and uncontrollable power, legislative, executive, and judicial, with respect to every object to which it extends, for by the last clause of the Section 8, Article 1st, it is declared that Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall, and then, so I'm not going to reread that. Go read what that article is all about. And that this article, it declares that the Constitution is the law of the United States. And read that as well. I'm not going to read that. But he continues on, it appears from these articles that there is no need of an intervention of the state's government between the Congress and the people to execute any one power vested in the general government. So there's the whole thing, and this is where none other than Patrick Henry got really upset when he argued against the Constitution. He said, where did we come up with the idea we, the people, approved all of this? And so the extent, and the Hamiltonian perspective was that, you know what? We, the people, are involved, and guess what? The federal government is over we, the people, all the people, okay? But yet in here, when none other than Yeats is arguing about this whole aspect of things, one of the things that he talks about, and he goes through and looking at the various other nations that were going through a process of what did that mean on federalism, what did it mean for a republic, and he talks about specifics. One thing he says here that I mentioned over the last couple of weeks, and in particular was in a message by Doug Wilson, is that the Greeks were jealous of their liberty. And so too were those who fought the revolution, were jealous of their liberty. In 2020, we don't have a lot of people jealous for their liberty. In fact, you're looked down upon. You are looking to be canceled out if you are jealous of your liberty. So with that, I encourage you to go and read through and understand that debate there, and that discourse and counter-discourse between 23 of the Federalists, Anti-Federalists, and understand that the execution of what we're seeing today is in fact not only that of the Federalist being manipulated, and some of the other what I have in there for references on the Communist Party USA, so on and so forth, that when the question was asked, did you expect things to turn out as they are in this cycle in 2020? Did you expect to see this in your lifetime? I can say yes, I did. I did expect it, because we don't teach it correctly, our history and how our Republican constitutional system is supposed to function. That's not there in schools anymore. And to the extent it's not preached from the pulpits. So with that, I want to take you, and it's in your references there, in the Sam Adams Wisdom section here at SamuelAdamsReturns.net. I took and put in this clip of this sermon from Dr. Dwight. You know, he was a great patriot. You can read about him, and you can hear about him in the chaplains and clergy of the Revolution. He ended up being the president of Yale College. His lineage is that his brother Theodore Dwight, Timothy Dwight, they were the grandsons of Jonathan Edwards. Their father was Colonel Timothy Dwight and was one of Governor Jonathan Belcher's best friends. So, you know, I have a great affinity to the Belcher Society, and you'll find a lot of references that I do from there. So the happiness of the chickens running around looking for happiness, this is the happiness portion, okay? The means of establishing public happiness. Now, this sermon is 24 pages long, okay? And I know that most Christians can't even sit for 15 to 45 minutes, but to hear a 25-page sermon is about 2.5 hours, all right? Some people, if they talk fast. You can probably squeeze it out in an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, but usually that many words. And I have 5 minutes left. So he pulls this from Isaiah 23:6, and it says, "And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times," what we just talked about. So he goes on, "To establish on firm foundation the happiness of society is evidently one of the most important concerns of man. If the attainment of happiness be highly desirable, the perpetuation of it must be more desirable. Its daily value is daily renewed during its continuance, and when extended through a century, it is mathematically proved to be of 100 times the value which it would possess if extended only through a year. The mind of man instinctively realizing this truth has ever labored rather to secure than to obtain happiness, both public and private. The attainment is usually not a difficult task. The establishment is Herculean. A free government has been always and justly supposed to be a primary source of national happiness. To form such a government has been found sufficiently easy, but to render it durable has been ever considered a problem of very difficult solution. Yet it is durably, plainly consist almost all the value of such a government. Hence, most of the political knowledge and labor of free men has been employed and exhausted in endeavoring to give stability to their respective political systems. Hence have arisen the numerous checks, balances, and divisions of power and influence found in our own political constitutions and in those of several other nations. In other nations, these means have been generally insufficient to accomplish the end. Whether they will issue more happily in our own is uncertain. In several instances, we seem to have approached the very verge of dissolution, but we have providentially withdrawn before the season of safety was past. Men of extensive political information and sagacious, which meaning having and showing keen mental discernment, forecast, have frequently trembled for our national existence, and notwithstanding some favorable interpositions of Providence in our behalf, they still wait anxiously to know what the end will be. Should we fall, the fairest hopes of the wise and good men will be blasted. The maxim that mankind cannot be governed without force and violence will stand on the higher proof and be advanced with new and triumphant confidence. And the great body of civilized men will probably sit down in sullen and melancholy conviction that the nations cannot, unless circumscribed by the Alps or an ocean, be permanently free. I want to stop there because go ponder that. Go read that at samueladamsreturns.net. I'm pointing to that, folks that are watching on YouTube. The fact is, we're not getting this preached from the pulpits, but what we have now are all of those that are fighting for our liberty, for fighting for Donald Trump to be re-elected, because the alternative is very, very simple. It is all of this other aspect. All of these people, the Obamas, all of the Democrats, in conjunction with the communists, which I have in the references, you have to go read that, the Communist Party working with the Democrats, really believe that Marxism, totalitarianism, the control of everything, lock you down for another 6 weeks minimum doing nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, go hear this sermon, because happiness will only stand when liberty stands at its fullness. And that fullness is when we take and kneel before what? Kneel before the cross and the throne of Christ and understand that he is the head, and every leader understands that as well, so that liberty can ring clear throughout the land. Sam Adams understood that very clearly, as well as the Anti-Federalist. So come on back next week, and we'll see you then.